How's it going, everybody? I want to say this right off the bat, this build did way better in underleveled content than I was expecting it to. For all the footage in this video, I was playing on -30 or harder, since that is going to be the new power delta when playing on ultimate difficulty, and so I wanted the build to reflect exactly how hard it will feel at reset. I also used various challenge modifiers that boost the power of the build while also giving me a better score multiplier. I just made a video on this earlier in the week, so go check that out if you want some ideas on what are the best modifiers to run. Now, thanks to all the buffs that Bungie made to each class, Warlocks have just been given another set of powerful builds to beat the endgame into the ground with. The biggest thing that is making turret builds pop off is the fact that all turrets now work with grenade-based verbs. So their damage is now scaling with the grenade stat, which on its own is putting out some crazy damage, but they are also working with certain fragments and aspects, which is making them even more powerful. Fragments like Facet of Dominance on Prismatic or Spark of Shock on Stormcaller will now let Arc Buddies jolt targets with each hit, which is making them even more insane since Jolt is easily one of, if not the best, subclass verb for ad clear. So let me get into showing you the build, and if you think the build is awesome too, then please leave a like on the video. And if you enjoy my other content as well, please consider subscribing too. Now, for this build, we're going to be running pure Arc and not Prismatic. I've already seen a few Prismatic builds and wanted to give you something different and something fun. And when I say fun, I mean potentially cancerous for every enemy combatant you'll see. For this build specifically, we'll be rocking the aspect Arc Soul to obviously get a little tiny Arc Buddy. When we cast our Rift, we get an Arc Soul for 15 seconds. Stepping into the Rift resets the timer, so it'll be really easy to keep the Arc Buddy active for an entire activity. And because we're running the OG aspect, we won't need to run Getaway Artist to get the overcharged Arc Buddy, since being amplified gives us the overcharged Arc Buddy. They've even updated the aspect description, stating that Arc Soul damage is scaled by the grenade stat. The other aspect that we're going to pair with Arc Soul is Electrostatic Mind. Defeating targets with Arc abilities or defeating jolted or blinded targets creates ionic traces. Collecting an ionic trace makes you amplified. The ability to generate ionic traces will synergize with the entire build, but you can already see the synergy to overcharge your Arc Soul is to just let it get a kill and generate an ionic trace, and then boom, instant overcharged Arc Buddy. And I haven't even mentioned the fragments yet. Well, that's technically a lie. I already mentioned Spark of Shock, which is one of the fragments that we're running with this build. Your Arc Grenades jolt, which means your Arc Buddy jolts. So even if it doesn't manage to get the final blow to count as an ability kill, the target will be jolted, so defeating them still generates an ionic trace thanks to Electrostatic Mind, and does additional ad clear thanks to the jolt effect. The next fragment that we're rocking is Spark of Beacons. While you are amplified, your Arc Special and Heavy Weapon final blows create a blinding explosion. With this fragment, our main weapon of choice becomes a crowd control ad clear machine. Since you will be amplified the entire time, this basically translates into every weapon kill blinds enemies. The third fragment of choice is Spark of Discharge, so that we can generate even more ionic traces from our arc weapons. In addition to the fact that ionic traces will now also give us stacks of bolt charge. And with so much outgoing ability damage, we'll be able to trigger the lightning from bolt charge very easily. And the best fragment to pair with Spark of Discharge for this build is easily Spark of Frequency. Not only will it increase the effects of Amplified, it also makes every ionic trace give us 2 bolt charges instead of 1, so we can easily ramp up the stacks of bolt charge for additional ad clear. Now, with the aspects and fragments sorted, the best grenade to pair with this arc debuffing build is Flashbang grenades. This gives you another source of crowd control if you need to quickly shut down an enemy type, like an unstoppable champion, and it gives you an additional source of blinding for Electrostatic Mind. The super is personal preference. I always use Chaos Reach, but Storm Trance will do really well with this build. With the subclass setup complete, let me cover the weapons and armor stat setup that you'll want for this build. You might have realized it already, but the weapon we're pairing with this build is Delicate Tomb. It's an exotic released from way back in Season of the Plunder, and it synergizes with Arc perfectly. If you don't own this exotic, you can purchase it from the exotic kiosk in the tower under the Witch Queen tab, or you can use the new chrono logs and pick it up from the Monument to Seasons Past. Now, Delicate Tomb is the best choice for this build because its exotic trait completely revolves around jolting targets and generating ionic traces. The exotic perks on Delicate Tomb allow it to generate ionic traces on final blows, and when collecting an ionic trace, it overcharges the weapon, doubling its damage and jolting on hit. And the catalyst states, when collecting an ionic trace, it partially reloads the magazine, and with this build, you'll basically never have to reload. This ends up just being one big ball of arc debuff synergy. Because of all of the arc debuffs, you have Overload and Unstoppable champions covered, thanks to the blinding and the jolting. So that leaves the rest of your weapons free to cover anti-barriers and focus on DPS. Now for the exotic armor piece, I've really been torn between Crown of Tempest and Fallen Sunstar. I did a number of activities testing both exotics and they each did really well. Fallen Sunstar felt good no matter what your stats were, since the exotic trait on Fallen Sunstar makes ionic traces move faster and grants additional ability energy, causing the ionic traces to give you a really big chunk of your ability energy back when you pick them up. But it doesn't give you extra super energy, so you won't be popping your super as often, unlike Crown of Tempest. The exotic trait on Crown of Tempest is an arc ability or jolt final blow increases the recharge rate of all your abilities, including your super. And this recharge rate is no joke. There isn't any specific playstyle for this exotic except kill. And Crown definitely felt like it had the better ability spam loop if your base stats were high. If they were lower, then the recharge rate wasn't as good as Fallen Sunstar. But that means that your armor stats need to be 100 in melee, 100 in super, and 100 in class, while getting 200 in grenade. And this might be a bit difficult for some players who haven't been grinding armor. My Warlock doesn't have much good armor yet, so my stats are barely scraping by. Regardless of the exotic that you pick, you'll want 160 grenade because we'll use fonts to make up the difference. And then get your melee, super, and class stats as close to 100 as possible. After picking the armor pieces for the stat rolls that you want to run 2 special ammo finders on your helmet and a harmonic siphon. This will let you run Delicate Tomb like a primary weapon thanks to the improved special ammo generation, and on your gauntlets, run 2 grenade font mods to bring our grenade stat up to 200. Also run Bolstering Detonation, as this will help with our class ability regeneration, since it's the only source of healing available to this build. On your chest piece, run 2 arc ammo generation mods to boost the ammo generation stat of Delicate Tomb, and then run a resist mod of your choice. On your boots, run Elemental Charge, allowing ionic traces to give you armor charge and kickstart the font mods, Stacks on Stacks to give you an additional armor charge whenever you pick up ionic traces, and an Arc Scavenger mod to give you additional ammo whenever you pick up an ammo brick. On your class item, run 2 class fonts to increase your class ability stat, and a proximity ward to give you an overshield whenever you perform a finisher. In the artifact, there aren't actually that many mods that benefit Arc this season. The most important artifact mods for this build are Diviner's Discount to reduce the cost of scavenger mods, Refresh Threads so that whenever you collect an ionic trace, it grants extra ability energy, Elemental Coalescence to give us another way of generating ionic traces, Shield Crush so that when we're amplified, both the Arc Buddy and the Flashbang Grenade recharge faster and deal more damage. And finally, Elemental Overdrive so that when we do collect an ionic trace, our arc weapons deal even more damage. Now, as you've been watching, the gameplay loop is pretty straightforward. Just play close to your rift and spam abilities whenever the cooldown is done. Then add clear with Delicate Tomb if you've got nothing better to do. Playing around your rift is really important for this build, because you won't have access to healing otherwise. While amplified, you take reduced damage, but without a way to heal it back, you will eventually die. Playing around the rift also has the dual benefit of refreshing your Arc Soul timer, so that whenever you do need to move from your current position, you will always have the maximum time for your Arc Buddy. Because all your abilities have such high uptime, it's not hard to slay out in ad-dense content. This build works especially well the more enemies that are present because it lets you generate more ionic traces. I mentioned earlier that I put on challenge modifiers for each activity, and I made sure to pick modifiers that would boost the power of the build. For the challenge modifiers that I was running, Cosmic Superconductor and Arc Hunger were my go-to options. They improved ability regeneration across the board, and I also ran Arc Surge so that all arc damage was increased by 25%, and that about covers it. It has been so much fun to play around with the builds this past week, trying to come up with Warlock buddy builds. And I haven't even had a chance to play with Titan or Hunter yet, so I can't wait to mess around with an infinite golden gun idea that I have. Anyway, if you've made it this far, thank you very much for watching. Let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions on how to tweak the build and make it better. I'll definitely give it a test. With all that said, have a great day and I'll catch you in the next one.